So what is this choice? What's the choice every coupled person makes that they don't know they make that makes all the difference? Well, happy couples make the happy choice. Doesn't quite define it, does it? So what's the happy choice? Well, to answer that question, we're going to read a passage from the Apostle Paul's first letter to the church in the Roman city of Corinth about 2,000 years ago. The original audience for this letter was a group of former pagans, people who, before they heard about Jesus, didn't really have the kind of moral compass that, say, like a Jewish person would have had. When they were pagans, they worshiped gods that weren't necessarily good and loving. They were powerful, and so you did what you thought would earn their favor. It was kind of messed up. They didn't really know what love was beyond a feeling. They didn't have like an ethical basis for love. So we're going to look at what's known as the love chapter today. You've probably heard the passage we're going to look at before. It's beautiful. But it's also a direct challenge to the sentimental reason that this passage gets read at just about every wedding you've ever been to. And since we've all read this or heard this so many times, there's something in here that I think we miss. We just kind of breeze right past it, and we shouldn't, because while most of this makes sense, there's one statement in here that doesn't. And it's the secret to making the happy choice. So we're going to go through the whole thing, and then we're going to stick in that part that doesn't make sense and make sense of it. So here's what Paul says. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 7. He says, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." See, these former pagans were attracted to the kind of religious experiences that they felt like they knew before in their previous life, which included speaking in tongues, which, if you've never witnessed, it's something else. And Paul points to that and says, that's okay, I guess. I'm not going to tell you to stop. But if you do that and you don't have love, it's just a lot of noise. And that goes for a lot of things that involve words. It goes on and he says, if I have prophetic powers, I understand, I can predict the future, and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, like I'm really, really smart. And if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. You hear what Paul's saying, right? That knowledge isn't what matters, love matters. If you don't have love, you are nobody. That's another way to translate this I am nothing word is I am nobody. So Paul says important sounding words don't matter if the one saying them doesn't have love. Words of prophecy and knowledge don't matter if you don't have love. And even words that sound like they come from deep faith, they don't matter if you can't see and hear the love. Now, what I'm about to say is probably a subject for another time and maybe even another place, but there's something I hear in this verse that doesn't have anything to do with being a happy couple, but I think it really applies to what's happening in our world today, so I'm just going to put it out there and then move on. I think this verse, these two verses, they give us a very specific word that we need to be a lot more discerning about who we listen to, especially on the internet. See, we live in a world today where people can influence us, can literally change our minds, and the only thing we know about them is their opinion. We literally know nothing else about them but one thing they wrote or said or created that clicks with something we kind of think. And then we see what they said or made and we think, well, I'm not alone. And we click share. Someone else thinks this thought enough to create a meme about it. So it must be okay, right? This is how ideas are spread today, and yada, yada, yada. The measles are back. There are certain opinions where you can't tell on the surface if the person sharing it genuinely believes it or they're just a troll. And since you don't really know them, you don't have the context to know if they are a person worth agreeing with or not. They literally have no body in your life. You can't tell anything about them other than their words. And this verse is telling us if you can't tell that they have love, you shouldn't be giving them room in your mind or in your heart. All right, back to happy couples. Next verse. If I give away all my possessions and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Now, this verse is pretty strictly saying if you give to get, you get nothing from God. And any of you who are listening to prosperity preachers need to hear this, and please stop. They're false prophets and they prey on the weak. But Paul is saying that none of that stuff really matters. Love is what matters. Having love is what matters. But what does it mean to have love? I mean, I have love. I feel love. I like the feeling of love. So if I feel like I'm loving, I can do whatever I want, right? It's just love. I mean, how can anyone define love? But love is a feeling. I feel bad when people are going through a hard time. That's love, right? I feel great when I see someone I care about. That's love, right? Love's an internal feeling. If I have love, that's what I have. It's that internal feeling, right? Wrong. Here's what love really is. Love is something you do. It says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Let's go through those real quick. Love is patient. Love puts somebody else first. Love goes second. Love goes to the back of the line. Love is kind. It says and does nice things. It doesn't just think them, it does them. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Love isn't jealous. When you're smarter than me, when you shine brighter than me, when you get more attention than me, love doesn't envy. It's not boastful. Love is not going to try to one-up you. If I love you, I want for you to shine. That doesn't threaten me. When you get the big laugh at the party, I'm not going to try and do one better. I'm going to enjoy that with you. So love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It's not self-seeking. We talked about that. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. And we're really close to the thing that doesn't make sense, so we'll come back to this thought later. So here we go. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Here it is. There's one of these on this list that doesn't really make any sense. Because I can understand bearing all things. I mean, you got to take the good with the bad, right? And hoping all things, where would we be without hope? And enduring all things, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But believes all things? Believes all things? That doesn't sound like a recipe for being tricked, does it? Who wants anyone to say of them, oh, they'll believe anything? So what is this doing here? Actually, this is incredibly important. This idea is the key to happy relationships, and not just with your significant other. This is the key to your relationship with your kids and your coworkers and your neighbors. Because in every relationship, there is a gap between what we expect people to do and our experience. In every relationship, there is a gap between our expectations, what they told us they were going to do or led us to believe they were going to do, and our experience of what they actually did. And every single time, whenever things don't line up, we choose what to put in the gap. It's a choice we make even if we don't feel like we're making it. Even if it feels more like a reaction than a choice, we choose what to put in this gap. We either choose to believe the best. We say, I don't know why he didn't follow through. I don't know why she's late. But you know what? I'm sure they have a good explanation. And once I hear the story, I'm sure it'll make sense. Or we assume the worst. We say, it happened again. I kind of expected it. That's how it always is. Happy couples make it a habit to believe the best. This is what it means to believe all things. It's a choice. Happy couples choose to believe the best until they just can't believe it anymore. Every single time there's a gap, even when it's the same gap over and over again, what you place here is what you decide to place here. And you will either believe the best or you will assume the worst. But whichever way you go, it's a choice you have made. Now, there's two obstacles to this. The two obstacles are one is what we experience, and the other is who we are. Because let's be honest, we didn't show up in any relationship as a blank slate. We showed up in the relationships we're in with all the baggage and all of our wounds and issues from the past. We bring all that stuff from the past, and we also have our eyes open during a relationship. We remember stuff. We learn from our experiences with a person. But both of these obstacles are the past creeping in to the present. And either of these obstacles can make you think it's okay to become suspicious. And when you let yourself become suspicious, it makes it so the person you're with can't really be themselves. They're walking on pins and needles. They're super careful. And you know what? They will start to look like they're up to something. Because they are. They're trying to keep you from being suspicious and upset. So when you bring suspicion into a relationship, you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You set the stage for the thing that you fear the most. Because the environment that you created by being suspicious. But we can still choose to believe the best in spite of these obstacles. We can come up with the most generous explanation for the other person's behavior and believe it. With that in mind, let's go through a few of these verses. It says, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love isn't trying to catch the other person doing something wrong. Love isn't building a case against the other person. Love doesn't keep score. It sure doesn't set traps. Love doesn't want to be right about the other person being wrong. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love doesn't let suspicion sneak its way into the relationship. Love chooses to trust, chooses to believe the best. Love chooses a generous explanation and believes it. Love hopes. It always hopes. Love is a positive force. It doesn't allow you to go negative. And love endures. This word endures implies that there is going to be resistance, that there may be some doubt, that there may be some negative things, but love decides, you know what? I'm going to persevere. I'm not going to give in to that. So what about you? Do you believe the best, or do you assume the worst? Do you believe the best when there's a gap? Do you find yourself saying, you know what, I'm sure there's a good reason? Or do you think, she better have a good reason? And I'm already mad and I don't even have all the information. I'm already mad and I know nothing. But happy couples know it's a choice. It's your choice every single time. There is another option. Option B is delights in uncovering mistakes, thrives on speculation, assumes the worst, embraces doubt. I'd add a fifth one, and does it with friends. Just lay a trap and wait for them to step in. Does that sound better? Will that make you happier? No, it won't. So here's your homework. Do this for a week. This week. Just decide. Say, before I get all the information, before he calls, before we get together tonight, I'm going to come up with a generous explanation, and I'm just going to believe it. I'm going to choose to believe my own explanation for their behavior. Just for a week. Choose to trust. And see what happens. Think about the people in your life who you would do anything for. The people that you would never want to let down. Are they people who are suspicious of you? Or are they people who accept you and love you? I'll bet my life on the fact that the people you want to please the most are the ones who accept you the most. So be one of those people. Choose to trust. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't have difficult conversations. Of course you have difficult conversations. Sometimes you believe the best and you find out you were wrong, so you talk about that. You have difficult, honest, hard conversations. And when it's the same thing over and over, of course you talk about it, but as soon as the conversation is over, you get right back to it. Because that's the past. Love doesn't keep score. If it's the 10th time you've had the conversation, have it, but then get back to believing the best. Because happy couples know that believing the best is a choice. Let's pray. God, I ask that you would bless our relationships with each other, all kinds of relationships, but especially those that are closest to us, most important to us. Help us to believe the best about each other. Help us to serve each other and to love each other. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I saw some questions pop in.
So the first one says, any advice for not being so judgmental?
Yeah. Well, you had a second to think about that. Do you have any?
I think what you were speaking to is true, that you start by what are you going to believe? I think we got to always be honest about who we are. So maybe to start with like, okay, that person's doing this, but like, let's do a little self-inventory. Study the scriptures. Jesus is really clear. Don't judge lest you be judged. Start with prayer, what we talked about last week. Walk around and pray about it, and you'll see God's going to put stuff in your heart and be like, yeah, I know that person's the worst, but maybe look in the mirror.
If this is a question about you being judgmental, absolutely. If it's a question about the person you're with is so judgmental, everything we've talked about the past 4 weeks apply. Like, drop your end of the rope first. Believe the best about that person. If they're doing something that isn't not their best choice for them, like, believe something else about them and see what happens.
See what happens. I like that. What are the most challenging words to say in a marriage? Is it, I was wrong, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? What's the hardest one?
Those are all really
hard.
Yeah. And I think the secret to marriage is being able to say those hard things, and having that environment of trust where you can say, I was wrong, and you know that that's not going to be like held over you. That
ha-ha! Right. Yeah.
If you're in a relationship where you feel like your partner can't say they were wrong, like, do a little self-inventory on what kind of environment are you creating. Like, you can't fix somebody else, but you can fix you.
Yeah.
What do you think is the hardest one?
Yeah. On that list, okay, so specific, I was wrong, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? For me, I was wrong. That's a hard one. It's much easier to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was right, but I'm sorry. I was wrong. That's hard. We got to admit that, like, we were dumb. Like, we made a mistake. But I think it's as important for us to hear ourselves say it as it is for the other person to hear it. Like, we have to own that. I was wrong. That's true with us and God too, by the way. It's much easier to pray for like things we want to see happen than it is to be like, God, I was wrong. I made a mistake. Like, I messed this up and I need you to help me fix it. Those are harder prayers, which is why as Presbyterians, we do confession every single week. Because we need it.
I was wrong is the gateway into the Christian faith. You can't be a Christian if you think you're right. And and it's really freeing to say, I was wrong.
That's
wow,
true.
Nothing changed. I was wrong and I'm still here. It's really...
I love that, the gateway into the Christian church. That's true. Like, if you've never accepted Christ into your life and you're like, what magic words do I need to say to become a Christian? It is essentially like, God, I was wrong. You were right. I need you.
Yeah.
That's not, like, that gets you where you need to be. Like, that's where it starts. I like that. How would this apply to other relationships, like my kids or my parents?
I think the one with the kids is a real straight correlation. Like, believing the best about your kids, even when maybe you shouldn't. That's how they mature. That's how they grow up, and they will rise to your expectations.
Yeah.
More than the other. And of course, there's exceptions to everything. But one thing I think we need to get over as a church and as a people and as a nation is this idea that exceptions disprove the rule. That's not how it goes. Exceptions prove the rule. And so kids will rise to your expectations, and when they don't, reassess. But
Yeah, maybe believe the best about them and their place in the world. So especially with kids, like, my child is 5 minutes late, and I do this, right? Like, they're 5 minutes late. They drove off a cliff.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're 5 minutes late because the light was red and they were hoping it would be green. Like, I think sometimes we go to these worst case chaos scenarios. My kid, doesn't have a good grade in this class. They're not going to get to college. They're not going to get a job. They'll end up without a job at all. They'll be alone. They'll move back in with me. We run through these things, like, or they had a rough week and they did bad in a class and it's fine. Right? So believe the best about them, believe the best that they'll bounce back, believe the best that the world actually is more fluid than we think it is.
Yeah. And I would put a caveat on that. Like, sometimes some parents believe the best about their kids and it's like way too much. And it's like, it never worked out for me, kids, so it's all riding on you. So okay, I think we have
true.
to...
There's balance.
Yeah.
What if your partner starts taking advantage of your belief and trust? Where is that line to distrust? That's the real crux, isn't it?
It is. And that can happen. But, if what you've been doing hasn't been working, try something else that might not work. You know, people realize things about themselves not because they're told it, but because they realize it, because they are put in a situation where they're like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. I'm being terrible. And sometimes you have to sit with that for a while. And in order to sit with that for a while, I think in that kind of relationship, you need to be with a partner who's letting you sit with it, but not rubbing it in, or not, who's still believing the best about you. So you can come and say, I'm kind of the worst, aren't I?
And I think every week we say this, but we'll just keep saying it too. All of these principles apply if you're in a healthy relationship. So if we think about like our physical health, if you're relatively healthy, eating broccoli is a good choice. That'll make you healthier. If you are hospitalized and need a heart valve replacement, eating broccoli is still a good choice, but that's not going to fix the heart valve. Surgery is going to fix the heart valve. So in a relationship, if you're mostly healthy, assuming the best, praying about it, those things are going to really make a big difference to help it go the long haul. If your relationship is in critical care, that's a different level. You can't just believe the best and that's going to fix all of it. Right. So there is a line which your relationship isn't healthy anymore and you need help. You need to talk to a therapist. You might need to take a break. You might need to say, we got to talk this out, or we need help, or this isn't working, and say the hard things. We're not saying that you just walk around all the time and are like, no, this is amazing. I haven't seen him in 6 months, but I'm sure he'll come back. No, there's a line, right? There's a line. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, if it's healthy, this works. If it's not healthy, it doesn't, and you're going to get yourself hurt. So, make sure you step back first and be like, for the most part, are we healthy?
And that's why it's important to not be isolated as a couple.
Right.
You need to be in a small group or in church. Have someone you can talk to about stuff.
Yeah, and talk to your friends, talk to other Christians in the church. If you're like, no, I'm just believing the best, and everyone's like, oh, it's such a good choice. Yes. You're like, I'm believing the best, and everyone's like,
yeah.
You gotta listen to that too. All right, last one, just this comment. Paul was a wonderful writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful words.
Beautiful stuff.